might recreate my husband's favorite convenience foods for less money, better flavor, and not much more time or effort. Welcome to the very first episode of Homemade Junk Food with Kraft Macaroni and Cheese. So many years ago, I believe it was America's Test Kitchen, I saw them make sort of like a copycat how to make Kraft mac and cheese, but homemade and just slightly better using fresh ingredients, and I thought that I would recreate that. When I was a kid, I enjoyed both Kraft mac and cheese and like homemade mac and cheese, the proper kind, right? With a roux, with butter and flour, and you bake it in the oven with breadcrumbs and stuff. I actually liked both of those kinds of mac and cheeses growing up, and consequently, I still love them both as an adult, for different reasons, of course. But the real test is, will my husband like it too? He never actually has been a fan of homemade mac and cheese, the baked kind, but he does really have fond memories of Kraft mac and cheese, so I'm hoping that I can win him over with my homemade version of the dish. Before we get into the meat of the episode, there's no meat in mac and cheese. Before we get into the bulk of the episode, I want to note that I have written versions of the recipes in the video description below, and also do not attempt to start making this dish before you finish watching the video. Watch the video all the way through to the end because you'll see there's kind of a plot twist. Anyway, on to mac and cheese. So hey, I am coming to you all old school from a wide shot in my very normal working class kitchen. I see you in the comments, good sir, and stop. This is what a real kitchen looks like. None of that pristine expensive stuff that you see from big companies. Anyway, I'm making both of these at the same time because aside from a little prep work, which I have already done, they take exactly the same amount of time to make. The homemade version, probably an extra 1 to 2 minutes, because all I have done in preparation for it is I have cut, this is 4 1-inch cubes of cheddar cheese. And this is where the expense could vary. You could use less cheese than this. This is a lot of cheese. I err on the side of more cheese because cheese! I generally like to get more expensive animal products because the animals tend to have better lives that way. And both recipes use butter. I'm almost going to do a whole stick of butter in both the recipes combined. The boxed version uses regular fresh milk, whereas my homemade version uses canned milk. So that's one difference. And then the other difference is this very loud, crinkly plastic bag of macaroni. As you can see, this is the store brand. This is Winco brand. I didn't save the receipt when I bought this, so I don't know how much this specific bag of macaroni costs, but I did a comparable price check online. And this is our little baby, our Kraft mac and cheese, which we are impersonating. This one costs 98 cents. I remember that specifically, but you can get a store brand version of this. They were selling Winco brand versions of this for like 48 cents. I don't know how the flavor is in comparison. And this is the brand name one, so this is the one that I'm testing. And of course, you know, this price will vary as well, but this was 98 cents when I bought it. I checked it online just now and it was like 99 cents, so this is about what it costs. So this water is already boiling. The other water is not, because this is a cheap apartment stove and this is the only big powerful burner. All the rest are small and weak. I love it so very much. I'm just gonna let that boil with no macaroni in it while this poor thing comes to the boil. So anyway, in our instant Kraft mac and cheese, you have everything pre-measured really except for the milk and butter. So we are gonna have to measure the macaroni for our homemade one. Now I very carefully compared the calories so that this would be apples to apples comparison. And I determined that 1 1/4 cups macaroni with the amount of cheese that I'm using will yield the correct calorie count. I measured out the macaroni that's in the box and it's 1 1/2 cups of macaroni. The homemade is 1 1/4 cups of macaroni. These two macaroni products hydrate differently. Like the boxed one, I think it's already par cooked. And see how tiny it is? And then this is other macaroni. I don't know how well you can see that comparison. Anyway, the fresh macaronis, they're not fresh technically, but the macaronis that I bought that are not Kraft are a lot thicker. I actually kind of like how thin and flimsy the Kraft macaronis are. Now I have to separate them out from each other. That was a smart thing that I did. Come on, I know you can do it. I know you can boil. I switched these so that the small one was at the front so you could see them both better. Because if the tall one was in the front, it hides the small pot. But now, as a result, this one is boiling much faster than this one. All the water's gonna boil out. Here.
The rule is when you wander onto the set, you come into the video. Mwah. Hey Pam, say hi to the internet. They love fat kitties.
He's nervous because I usually don't grab him like this in the kitchen.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Okay, I'm gonna put this in the fridge because I don't like letting my milk get warm. I had it out for show, you know, for visual. Does that ever bother you, by the way, when you watch like more official, high quality produced cooking shows, how they like have milk sitting out on the counter for like an hour during the shoot and you're like, that's gone bad while you were filming it? I don't know, that kind of thing really bothers me. It also bothers me when they like let the food sit out for like 20 minutes before they eat it and it's like, now it's cold, you've ruined it. I believe in you. Okay, I'm going to switch these because this is ridiculous. You guys know that there's still a pot there, right? I don't know if I have any toddlers watching me. Like, it's disappeared now. Yep, now it just looks like I'm making one pot of macaroni. Ah, instantly it's like starting to boil. Ah, I wish I had a better stove. Okay, I'll do the Kraft one in the back burner because y'all know how to make Kraft mac and cheese, I think, maybe? And I'm gonna do the homemade one in the front burner. So, I don't know if you've noticed this, but like this macaroni takes much less time to cook than like other macaroni. So yeah, I guess the homemade version takes like maybe an extra 3 minutes to make compared to the boxed version. Ooh, you know what? While I'm waiting, I'm going to portion out my butter. So the Kraft mac and cheese one needs 4 tablespoons of butter. I think it's probably because when they process the cheese, they like have to remove the fat or something. So you have to add it back in with extra butter. And then my homemade version, I'm only going to use 2 tablespoons of butter. Usually when I make this, like I don't make it that often, but when I do, I usually don't measure anything. I just kind of eyeball everything. So I don't even know if these measurements are optimal. Again, I just like carefully calculated it out so the calories are the same. Okay, that's had like a 2-minute head start and it's about to boil over, so let's turn that down. And the Kraft. That's where you throw away the box and then you go, oh no, how do I make it? And then you have to pull it out of the trash. I actually do that all the time when I make instant food because I never make instant food. You know, I'm gonna measure out my canned milk. So this cheese, I just cut it into cubes because I was too lazy to wash my cheese grater. I was gonna say I was too lazy to get it out, but that part's easy. It's the washing it that's annoying. Washing a knife is so much easier, so I just cut it into little cubes, but you can totally grate it. You can use the pre-grated stuff, but I don't recommend it because it has a lot of starches and additives and it's more expensive usually. That's about done. That's also done. Awesome. Alright, now 2 tablespoons of butter in there. It's a good thing I have 2 strainers. And 4 tablespoons of butter in there. You get this spoon, you get this spoon. So as you will see, the process is pretty much identical for both methods. You add butter and melt it, and then into the homemade canned milk and real cheese. And 1/4 cup of fresh milk into the instant, and our very, very beautiful processed cheese mix. Lovely neon orange. That's the stuff. And the processed one, you just stir it until it's not lumpy. And kind of the same with the non-processed one. You just stir it until the cheese melts, which it's just about done. I need like a second cameraman. Ooh. Ooh. macaroni in. Brr. Processed stuff is definitely like flimsier and starchier, so it always sticks when you don't like liberate it from the strainer right away. I'll turn that off, and I'm gonna turn you off. Ah! Stop it, tripod. Okay, and we are ready. Okay, so we have on your left we have macaroni and cheese A, and on your right we have mac and cheese B. So I want you to try each one at a time and then give me an honest 1 to 10, 1 being awful, 5 being average, 10 being amazing, how good it is.
All right, I'd say 5.5.
5.5. And now B, you are touching it.
Yeah, that was a very average, normal mac and cheese. That's obviously the homemade.
Don't let that sway you.
I'm not. Actually, to tell the truth, I think I like the taste of the Kraft better.
I'm actually not surprised.
This tastes, I don't know, slightly sour, and I'm gonna give it a 4.5.
Okay, so there you have it. Okay, so after the crushing defeat of my mac and cheese, I thought it was time for a redemption arc. So I took the comments that my husband gave me into account, and to be honest, it had been like a long time since I'd made homemade Kraft mac and cheese. And I wasn't using a recipe, I was just winging it. So I have improved the recipe, and I think this one might at least tie with Kraft, maybe. All right. So he said that it was too sour, and I think that's just because I was using sharp cheese, and it was more cheese than I needed. Kraft mac and cheese is actually not that cheesy. It's very creamy, so I'm using half the amount of the cheese, and I'm using mild cheddar instead of sharp. I'm using 2.5 tablespoons of butter, so a little more butter. And I'm using a half of a cup of canned milk this time instead of a quarter, so twice as much milk. I am using the same amount of macaroni, and I'm also going to add just a tad bit of salt this time as well, because he said it wasn't salty enough, and yeah, I didn't put any salt in the last one, so of course it wasn't salty enough. And I'm not going to be simultaneously cooking another mac and cheese while I'm making this one, so it's not going to curdle like the last one did too, I hope. So with all those changes, it's the same amount of calories, so we're still comparing apples to apples, but it's actually cheaper now than the Kraft mac and cheese, so that makes me happy too. So another thing that I did differently this time is I saved out some of the pasta water. I'm not sure if I'm going to need that or not, but if I wind up needing it, it's nice that I have it. A little salt. There's not like one little piece of macaroni just kind of drowning in there. If that's the one piece my husband eats, it's going to be really soggy. That's okay. Kraft mac and cheese, the macaroni in there, like, I don't know about you guys, it feels like kind of soggy to me, but I kind of like that. It's part of the charm. Ooh, nice and creamy and not broken or curdled like the last sauce was. I'm going to turn off the heat. Woo! I'm going to taste it this time. That's nice. My heart won't be broken if you still don't like it as much as Kraft. But is it better than the last one that I made?
You know, it still has a slightly sour taste to it. And I would like it a little saltier, but it is good.
Okay, I'll take it. So I failed to make my husband like the homemade Kraft mac and cheese more than the original Kraft mac and cheese, although he did come around in the end with my new and improved recipe and thought it was like almost as good as Kraft in his eyes. He still thought that the cheese, even mild cheddar, was too sour to him. So if you have kind of a similar relationship with real cheddar cheese, you might want to use like a milder cheese for this recipe, like Munster. That will really mimic the processed mild flavor of the Kraft cheese. As I said earlier, Kraft mac and cheese is really not that cheesy. It's really more about the creaminess of the dish. And as I demonstrated, it really only takes an extra 2 to 3 minutes to make this dish homemade as opposed to from the box. So time-wise, I'd say they're pretty much identical. Calories, as I mentioned earlier, I made sure that the calories for both the homemade and the Kraft mac and cheese were exactly the same, so we were comparing apples to apples. So on to the real question, which is cheaper? So I do have the numbers worked out for my initial pass at the homemade Kraft mac and cheese, the one that had more cheese in it, in the video description. So check that out for like further information. But since I do think my second pass at the recipe with less cheese is actually better and a little more authentic and closer to the Kraft mac and cheese, that's the one I'm going to be analyzing for this portion of the video. So let's go over the numbers. Kraft mac and cheese, the total cost, you have the box at 98 cents, 4 tablespoons of butter, so that's $3.50 for 4 sticks. 1/8 of 4 sticks of butter is half a stick of butter, so that's 44 cents worth of butter. Oh my God, but you have to buy the whole thing of butter and it costs $3.50. You get to use that butter for other things. Oh wow, concept. So I only count the expense of the food that actually goes into the dish, not that you have to buy at the store. It's okay. You can use the food for other things. I'm not going to penalize you for investing in food. Moving on. 1/4 cup of fresh milk. So as I mentioned earlier, I buy organic pasture-raised meat, dairy, and eggs whenever I can. So my gallon of milk was $5.98. You can, of course, get milk for much cheaper than this. But again, I want to be a little more ethical in the way I treat animals. So I splurge for the more expensive milk. So 1/64 of a gallon of milk is 1/4 of a cup of milk. So 1/64 of $5.98 is 9 cents for the milk. So that makes the total cost for the Kraft mac and cheese $1.51. And that is either one really big meal, it's a little more than 1,000 calories, or it's like 2 smaller meals. And that's a pretty good bargain, I'd say. Like, that's a pretty nice cheap meal. I mean, there's not that much nutrition to it, but it's pretty nice and cheap. My husband often likes to supplement Kraft mac and cheese with a little side of frozen peas and carrots, and that adds a lot of nutrition and color and like flavor contrast for not that much more money, so recommend that if you want to add a little more nutrition to this meal. So now on to what I'm calling my redemption arc homemade Kraft mac and cheese recipe. We have 1¼ cups of macaroni, and as I mentioned earlier, I think the Kraft box has 1½ cups of macaroni, but theirs doesn't like plump up as much when you cook it, so it winds up being about the same amount of macaroni. That is $1.08 for 4 cups of macaroni for the entire giant bag that I bought at the store, so 27 cents per cup. So the 1¼ cups is 27 cents plus 7 cents, which is 34 cents total. 2.5 tablespoons of butter. That is, again, $3.50 for the 4 sticks. So it is 1/16 of the full 4 sticks of butter for 27 cents, plus 1/4 of that amount, because there's another ½ tablespoon of butter. A ½ tablespoon is 1/4 of 2 tablespoons of butter. 1/4 of 27 is about 7 cents. So that's actually 34 cents. My can of evaporated milk was 2 cups, so it was 1/4 of the whole can, which cost 89 cents. So that means 22 cents for the actual amount of milk that I used in the recipe. And then I eventually settled on 2 cubic inches of mild cheddar. Remember, it used to be 4 cubic inches in the original recipe, and cheese is easily the most expensive part of this recipe, especially since I also used a more expensive brand cheese instead of the cheaper store brand. This means about 1/3 cup of shredded cheese, and it's just over 1 ounce. It's like 1.2 ounces of cheese. So this particular cheese that I bought at the store was 43 cents per ounce. So that meant that the amount of cheese that I used in the recipe was just 51 cents. I did add a little bit of salt, but that was basically free. which brings my total cost to the homemade Kraft mac and cheese to $1.41. And compared to Kraft at $1.51, that means I saved 10 cents making it homemade, and it only took me an extra 2 to 3 minutes. So it's not that much cheaper than Kraft mac and cheese, and as I mentioned also earlier in the video, you can get like the store brand of Kraft mac and cheese, the off-brand that's not actually Kraft. I don't know how those taste, you know, there's probably some varying degrees of quality there, or you could even upgrade and buy the more expensive Annie's, which is actually what my husband and I both prefer over Kraft. But if you're gonna compare it to Kraft mac and cheese, homemade and Kraft mac and cheese are pretty comparable in price, and they're also very comparable in time, and I'd say they're rather comparable in flavor. I think if you have a child or someone who's just very, very used to Kraft mac and cheese and wants it to taste exactly like that, they're gonna be a little bit let down by the homemade version. But if you're someone like me who grew up with both homemade and Kraft, I think you'll like it a lot. So is it really worth it to make homemade Kraft mac and cheese? At the end of the day, I'd say 50-50. Doesn't really matter. Although if you ask me, I prefer homemade. So thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of this series. Thank you to my patrons, and I hope to see you in the next episode when I tackle Marie Callender's pot pie.